think I was just telling you guys, I had an English teacher that instead of writing an essay, she let me shoot some videos. The class just like loved it. They were cracking up. They were laughing. I was like, ooh, okay, this is something new. And this is different.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the About Story Podcast. My name is Nathan Johnson, and today I'm here with Jace Hardwick.
Hello.
Hey, Jace.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm really glad we were able to make this, work this out. I know it's been a scheduling things. Have been like,
on my end, I got a little confused. I was like, oh no, it's like tomorrow. But then we found out that the dates were, I misread the dates, but I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah.
I made it. I survived.
Yes, it all worked out. Absolutely. We want to hear a little bit about you. Like, where did you grow up? I know like right now you're doing a lot. You have your own production company. You like directing. How did you start out? Let's go back. Let's go back a few years.
Let's go back in the story, the origin story of Jace. I grew up in Santa Cruz, California. I was there all the way up until about high school, and then I moved out here for college. But my like storytelling journey / like coming into being a CEO of Action Studios, like the company that we run, kind of started back where one was my sister, because she was in the storytelling sphere. She worked in Hollywood for a while, and I always was like the kids in her movies and all that stuff. And then I thought I was going to be an athlete. I was like, I'm going to be a football star, like all this stuff, because that was like how my brother was. And then I didn't get any bigger, so football was not really in the cards for me. But me and my buddy, my co-director, Oliver, everyone calls him Yo-Yo, but we started making videos way back when in like high school, just doing like the YouTube stuff, just having fun and trying to figure it out. And then I think I was just telling you guys, I had an English teacher that instead of writing an essay, she let me shoot some videos. The class just like loved it. They were cracking up. They were laughing. I was like, ooh, okay, this is something new. And this is different. That kind of like sparked, okay, I really want to like look into doing more of the video thing and figuring that out. And it was really because of like my sister and my teachers, and like honestly my environment around me. Like I never really had like, you can't do it, you can't follow your dreams. Everybody around me was always very positive, and they were like, that sounds great. So I'm like, okay. Back then, that's kind of like how I got into it. And then coming out into college, I started meeting a lot of people at Biola, and through that started talking about like what running a company would look like and what a production company would look like. And I've always kind of been somebody that like wants to tread his own path and do his own thing and be his own boss. So from there, me and my co-director were still making videos, and I think that kind of attracted the attention of some people. We made our first commercial in college, and then I think the rest of that's kind of like history. We started our company, and now we're 4 years in officially. So that's where the origin story kind of starts, more or less.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How did you choose Biola?
That's also a long-winded answer, but I actually jumped around to a bunch of different schools. I started off at Sac State, and then I went to Santa Monica because I wanted to try to get into UCLA. Was just a young freshman out here and didn't know what I was doing. I was like by myself in LA, so I went back home to a JC back in Santa Cruz. I was gonna go to Chapman, and then my uncle told me about Biola because he went to Biola, and I didn't even know what Biola was. Visited the campus, and I just like fell in love with it because it was like a smaller campus, but I really liked what their program was doing. I just loved the environment there. I felt like it was like a miniature like Disney when I was walking around, so I just fell in love with it there. So yeah, and then the rest, I picked Biola and never looked back.
Do you still work with people from Biola?
Oh yeah, very often. I think most of the time when we're doing commercials or anything like that, we'll hire most people out of Biola just because our connections and our roots are so deep there. So yeah, most of the time. So
tell me a little bit about what you do specifically. So you're directing, you work with clients, I'm assuming. So you're directing like commercials, or? I guess
I wear multiple hats. Like our company's smaller right now, and it's starting to grow. So I can't just say I do like one job. But the way that our company works is that we manage social media clients, and then we also do commercials for bigger brands. Now we're running my team convinced me to do like the Jace Hardwick brand because followers are like a currency now, and that's just kind of the way that our markets are going, is to build that personal brand. And then in the background, we're pitching movies. So there's like 4 major sections that we're doing. So my day-to-day is kind of just like overseeing most of that, and then dipping a lot of my toes into the creative. So when we have like a commercial, I will step in with my co-director and we will write out the scripts, write the ideas. We're just kind of like an idea generating machine at that point. And then we will direct most of the commercials and the social media content that we do with people. I'm hoping to expand that more so that I don't have to have I'm not so stretched thin, because I would love to just be a director and a creative producer in that realm, but right now I'm kind of all over the place. So
what do you like the most about it?
I don't know, there's a lot to it. I'm very driven about like meeting with people and getting to interact with people. I think I got into film in the first place because I wanted to travel and get to like actually have personal connections with people. So I've always kind of had a heart there where, as much as we're trying to tell these stories and, get jobs so that we can keep the lights on, a lot of it's more about like the human connection and being able to make like actual deep relationships with people on sets and stuff like that, where, I would think some other jobs you don't necessarily get to like travel the world and meet a lot of people, versus film. I've gotten to meet so many different types of people all over the place, and I think that's like one of my favorite aspects of it. It's just getting to hear their stories. So
what's it like working with your collaborators?
I always grew up with Yo-Yo, who's my co-director, and I think that we kind of have an interesting dynamic of like kind of like a Key and Peele type like bits and skits and whatever, and we've kind of just like, that's just been since middle school. We've just always done that. And then we made jobs out of doing that and making funny things for other people now. So that one is an interesting one that I don't really like. I can't really sit here and say, I don't know like how that ended up working out. I think it's just having a deep relationship for a really long time. And so a lot of what that looks like is just like us sitting in a room and tossing a bunch of bad ideas at the wall, and until one sticks, and then all of a sudden we'll know which one is the right one because we'll just be laughing, and it's, like all pride's out the window. It's just like, okay, we're just going to say whatever bad idea. The rest of my team is definitely more in like the logistics sphere, and like they're the people. Andrew Bear is my producer that does a lot of our stuff. Like he's like the reason our lights stay on. Like he's the guy that's like wrangling together me and Yo-Yo as the creatives, running around doing stuff and making sure that we're actually moving forward in the way that we need to. So he's kind of creative in his own right in that way, where it's like, okay, we're going to take all of what you guys are talking about, and now here's the path that we're actually going to like. He's good at being a producer, basically. So a lot of it's just collaborative. We just have meetings with the whole team, and we'll just have like, we call them brain trusts, where we just toss any idea, anybody, doesn't matter what department you're in, if anybody has an idea, toss it out, and it might be a good one, and then we'll kind of work from there. So that's more or less how we go about doing our day-to-day. So.
And what's it like working with your clients? So do they usually approach you? Do you approach them? How does that work?
Right now, a lot of it's just been like word of mouth. We now onboarded sales agents, so they're going out and branching outside of LA. So they'll kind of go and meet and greet people and kind of be our ambassadors for us. But for the most part, it really is just like, we do one project and somebody else sees it and then they want that and then they contact us, and that's just kind of been the feedback loop as of right now. We're definitely having more and more people kind of outside of the LA sphere, just kind of talking to people and getting to work and find what people necessarily need. Because I mean, I can sell, but I'm not a sales guy. I'm more of the creative sphere, so we try to outsource that as much as we can.
For sure. So when you're developing something for your client, how does that process usually look? Or do they come up to you with ideas? Do you bring them ideas? Hey, these are the kind of things that we want to do? Or I'm not 100% familiar with how their method is, but it's the Harmon brothers. I'm pretty sure they have a really good method that I like overheard, and I've always liked that, where it was like, okay, sit down with your client. Like we just sat down with this other client recently, and the first meeting, what we do is we're in like the pre-production phase. So the first, it's just big idea phase. And the whole goal is to just sit down and just be like, what are your hopes and your aspirations about this ad? When you close your eyes, what do you see? What are you hoping to target? And we'll kind of just go through like a massive list. It's like, do you have ideas that you really want? Can we build off of that? Do you have no ideas? Do you want us to do it? So we kind of just start there. And I think that's kind of where really you're kind of like screening each other as business partners, because I do believe that every deal needs to be like a good 50-50 deal on anything that you do. And so that's kind of the pre of the writing is kind of where we're just asking for any and all things that they're hoping for. Build a relationship first, kind of ask them like, well, what's your brand about? What is the feeling that you want? What is the
target market that you're trying to hit? Like, do you want to be funny? Do you want to be more lifestyle? And we kind of boil that down. And I think after those conversations, sometimes we'll do 2, 3, even 4 meetings. And then by that time we boil down, okay, here's like the 3 nuggets I think that you guys are trying to get at. And then we'll come back with some ideas. And most of the time it's like right on the money just because of how much we're talking about it. And they're more or less in that part of the writing process together, because you're kind of going step by step and making sure that it's like no ideas coming out of the blue. So that's like the first phase for sure. And then once you get into the second phase, it really is just like, okay, we've already talked about all this stuff. Here's the ideas that we came up with together as a collaborative team. And then our job on, at our company is just to like fine tune it and kind of come in as the filmmakers being like, okay, here's how it's going to look. Here's how we're going to execute that. Here's how long it's going to be. Here's the deliverable. And then they approve that and then we'll go and shoot. So it's very collaborative in the very beginning stages. And it's a very give and take depending on how much they, want to generate the idea themselves or how much they want to put it on us. So.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of your favorite projects that you've worked on?
In the commercial sphere, we did some campaigns for Silicon Valley High School, and that's what got us like our start in the commercial sphere, just because they were a client that gave us free reign. They were like, whatever you guys come up with, do it. Luckily, they loved it. And so that kind of helped jumpstart like, okay, like we do really, really well in the sci-fi fantasy comedy sphere of like telling stories even in commercials. And so I really even though like I look back and we could have done a way better job, obviously, because that was like coming right out of college. I still love those ones because they were the most fun. And I think they're the most talked about out of the people that we've worked with. And then personal projects, I think my favorite one is Candyman, which was my senior thesis, just because the story behind it was really nuts. I wrote the idea in a week. And then we pulled together a crew in 3 days of 30 people. We shot in 1 day. It was a short film. And then this was all for a competition. We thought we had 2 days to edit before the competition. We come to find out that they're on the East Coast. So we actually only had about 24 hours right after we shot. We edited that, put that out, and we still came in second. So I think the story around it's like one of my favorite that we always look back on. And it was like the closest thing to the style of directing that I want to do in future projects for sure. So that's like my favorite one.
That's awesome. Yeah. When you're doing more narrative projects, what's your writing process like for that?
It's all over the place. I think it's different for everybody, right? Right now, I think the methods that I'm finding as we're trying to write our bigger stories and as we're pitching is we really focus on idea first. I think it used to be backwards for me. And again, there's like no right or wrong answer, but like I think it used to just be like, I have this idea and I want to make it. Now, as I'm kind of getting more in the business sphere and kind of realizing that like, the film industry very much is like business transactional. I think what we're really starting to look at is just, okay, what's the idea? What's like the selling point of the idea? Why will that work? And then starting from there and then building up the script, because it's like the whole logline thing, right? It's like if you can write a logline and it makes you want to watch that, okay, that's probably a good, at least on the marketing front, like a YouTube thumbnail, whatever, that's a good place to start and then build it out from there. So now we're kind of more in that sphere where it's like, okay, let's just toss a bunch of ideas at the wall and then whatever one is like the most interesting, we'll go from there. And then as I'm writing, I think I have a plethora of different methods when it comes to trying to write stuff. I'll listen to music. Like first, sometimes I'll build out a playlist of like what I think the soundtrack's going to be. I'm very music driven. Like I come from a musical background with my family and stuff like that. So I'll write out a playlist. And then as I'm like writing scenes, I'll kind of just like break that up into obviously like a beat sheet and just kind of be writing to the music and how I'm feeling about each scene. And then from there, we're kind of like shifting the puzzle pieces together. And there was this video I watched a couple months ago that has really helped me recently where they call it getting into the flow state. So like for the first 20 minutes, I'll just sit and just put my hands on the keyboard and try to write anything that comes to mind. Then all of a sudden you'll kind of find yourself like getting through the hump, right? As you're kind of like, as you're working out, like warming up and then you're working out. And I just kind of get in that state. So that's like how I start, I guess. It's like, okay, what idea do we want to go with? And then how are we going to start writing this out? And then find those music playlists, kind of find anything that inspires me so that I can start writing, I guess.
Do you have people that critique your work?
Yeah, I try to. We always try to, again, we call them like another version of brain trust, which we like stole from like Disney and Pixar. They always talk about having those things. So what we'll typically do is once we have a first draft, we will call up as many people as we possibly can. And then the first time we did it, we just called up as many people as we can, read through the script, and then ask for their feedback. Now what we started to do is call as many people as we can and try to put them into categories of audiences that we think might fit for the script that we're trying to sell. So we'll have like ages, 18 to 20, or we'll have like 30 to 40 in this group, and then we'll mix that up, and then we'll have people that really love surfing or people that really love sports, whatever. And then we'll go through that and ask them to come, and then we'll like read our drafts, and then we'll just ask them for any critiques, doesn't matter. Any ideas, fine. We write those down, and we try to find the ones that are, reoccurring. So if we have two different groups of people saying the same thing about the same moments, okay, you circle that one. That's a problem. Right. Most people are agreeing. Then versus like another idea where it's like, oh, I don't really like this, but nobody else is really saying that. That's kind of more of like a subjective, like maybe that person just didn't like that. So we're trying to find the rules of three where it's okay if it's being talked about like three different times with three different groups, that's what you got to go fix. Kind of take every idea that's being tossed at you or every critique with a grain of salt, right? It's like, okay, do we want to change that? Do they know the full arc of the story? Yada, yada, So that's kind of how we're doing it right now. And it seems to work very well, at least right now. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like there's also that thing with creatives where it's like, okay, well, I just want to do my own thing. And it doesn't really matter what the audience thinks. I'm just going to do what's in my heart to say. And I feel like there's an element of that, but there's also an element of saying, okay, what does the audience want? Yeah. And we can deliver that to the audience. Because they're at the end, they're like your client. And they're, yep. And you want them to be happy with your project. I
think that's what my professors kind of always talked about too, which was like, once you release your movie, however they interpret it, that's the movie now. Like even if you might have had it, like when I wrote Candyman, it was definitely coming from like a different perspective, but then people kind of started taking it and it's like, was more like on a political sphere. I was like, that's not how I wrote it, but if that's how you're interpreting it, then that's the film. That's how it is. And we're just going to nod our head and say yes. So yeah, definitely.
Just gonna roll with it.
Yeah.
What are you? So have you shot any of these films that you're? Are these mostly in pre-production?
The long form right now are mostly in pre-production. So we've done a lot more like short form for competitions and things like that. But now we're kind of in the holding phase as we're young. So it's like people don't want to give us $1 million to make a movie yet, right? So we kind of have to like earn our keep. So right now we have like 3 major ideas that we've been working on. They have scripts, and then we're kind of just like shopping them around. So we haven't done any. My producer has worked on movies. I haven't done anything long form yet. I've just been more in the competition sphere. I'm kind of just waiting for like when we feel ready, because I think the way that we've been looking at this is we wanted to build up our company so that we can make movies rather than make movies to try to survive. And so we've kind of just been playing the long game, and I'm like not really in a rush. I was always thinking it's like if I can make movies in my 30s and direct in my 30s, that's totally fine. I'm okay with that. And so I kind of came from an approach with our team where it's like, look, I'd much rather try to focus on writing really, really good, deep stories and take a really long time, kind of like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, because back in their day, it wasn't like a rush. Yeah. Like we're in an era where everything is like being rushed. Like I'd much rather write something that lasts generations and we only put out like 3 movies than make 20 movies and they're forgotten about in 10 years, right? Yeah. So I think we're kind of in the patience game right now and just like working on them and doing the brain trust as much as we can and having as many people read them and critique them as we can. So that's where we're at right now.
That's awesome. What are some of the films or directors that have inspired you?
Definitely Peter Jackson, for sure. I think I became a filmmaker because of Lord of the Rings. I've seen Lord of the Rings like 100. Me and my roommates have watched it like 100 times.
Yeah, it's one of my absolute favorites.
It's so good. Yeah. It's just, there's so much depth to the characters and the stories. And I think like I just said, like, I think that one inspired me because it's one of those ones you can go back and keep watching it and keep finding like more depth to the story. So definitely that. I really like Edgar Wright. Edgar Wright was obviously new on the scene for his style and the way that he was doing stuff. So he inspired me, especially in this like day and age where it's more like social media and fast pace. I think he hit the market at the right time. Yeah. So I really, really liked a lot of his stuff. And his comedy stuff was always funny. Like Shaun of the Dead was like, I always thought that was hilarious. So those two were probably like the biggest ones to me. And then I loved Dune. Like, I just thought it was beautiful, and the way that he is slow to tell his stories, at least to me, is a breath of fresh air from the fast pacedness of everything. I like enjoy sitting in his stories, which maybe isn't for everybody, but like I personally really, really like it. So definitely that. Like Dune is. I'm hoping that the rest of the movies are good when they come out. So
yeah. I think there's a good chance that
yeah, he's doing a good job. He's crafting his story well. So
yeah,
I think those for sure. And then I get inspired by like a bunch of other shows and directors and stuff like that. But I think I always point back to them. I mean, everyone's been inspired by like Wes Anderson and stuff like that. But I think I always point back to those guys as like my top. Yeah.
Yeah. Just watching the behind the scenes of how they did Lord of the Rings, and you see all the collaboration, and it just looked like so much fun.
Yeah. Did you watch the Peter Jackson Diary series?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's how most people became filmmakers was that, and his love for it and the fun that he was having on set. That's what I was like, I want to do that. That looks fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I love that series. I think he did it again for Hobbit, which I didn't really like watch too much of. But I think that I definitely was drawn to his passion for film and what he was doing on set. I think that's, as a young kid, you're like, that looks so much fun. Like, so
it's inspiring.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's one of those things that really, for me, I feel like Lord of the Rings really shaped the generation of filmmakers.
Oh yeah,
almost in the same way like Star Wars did, where people saw Star Wars and like they became filmmakers because of Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
Like, Lord of the Rings.
100%. I mean, also too, when you think of fantasy too, you're like, you instantly go to Lord of the Rings and the way that they set up their characters from, I mean, they were pulling a lot from like Dungeons and Dragons for sure, but like you can't not think of an orc and be like Lord of the Rings, or think of an elf in Lord of the Rings. So yeah, he definitely shaped it for sure.
What are some of the things that you've learned along the way in your journey?
Let me just pull out the encyclopedia and just slap it on the table.
Well, I would say maybe if you were giving some advice to some young filmmakers who are starting out, what would you say to them?
I would have a lot to say. I don't know. I guess it kind of depends on like what their route is and like what they want to do. I wish that I studied business in film school because you get out and you realize, oh wait, this is just another business. As much as it's like, I want to tell stories and do all this stuff, follow the money. It's a business. Yeah. So I think that I wish when I was in school, I did more business, because anyone can be a filmmaker. Like, and then if they want to be great, they have to study on their own. And there was even a point when I was in film school where it's like the professors can only teach me so much, and then they'd get to a point where it's like, well, you just got to go shoot a movie, and it's like, okay. And the resources that are like at hand for everybody now, like that you can obtain right now, is just like a plethora on the internet. So I wish that I did business school, just so that I can learn the transaction of like what it actually takes to sell a movie. Or if you're not even in that sphere, because film school has its place for sure, I would just be reading books or trying to get coffee with as many. I wish I got more coffee with a lot of people and just picked their brain for 5 to 10 minutes. I had this one professor, Abel Vang, shout out to Abel Vang. He was phenomenal, because I would sit down and he would genuinely be like, okay, you have this idea, but how are you going to sell that idea? Who's going to be in it? What's your marketing power, right? Like, this is why you need A-lister actors. This is why the idea has to click with like this group of people. Is there a market for it? Blah, blah. Like all these things where you have to like think on like the business side of it first, because it'll save you a lot of time and energy, where it's like, it is the unfortunate thing where it's like, but I love the story, I have a passion for it, but it's like, yeah, but is it going to sell? And why is somebody going to give you like millions of dollars to go make that movie if it's like not, if it's only going to hit like a subgroup of people? Yeah. I think that's just like the hard truth about it. So I wish that I did more business for sure. And then, I don't know, take more writing classes so that I could be better, pick people's brains about what works, be more collaborative. If I was in college, I would be shooting stuff every day, like all the time, short form, long form, collaborating with as many people as you possibly can, picking their brains, because that's your time to just test stuff out. Once you get in the real world, it's like people want money for their time. Yeah. I mean, I tried to shoot a lot when I was in college, but I think shooting as much as humanly possible when you're and to play, like that's the thing. It's like the more reps you get, the more you're going to notice what works and what doesn't work. And you're a student right now, so it's okay. You're okay to fail. Right. Once you get in the real world and you're playing with real money, you can't fail anymore. So like use that to build your portfolio of work, and also start thinking about what you might want to do outside of college, because nobody really cares about the degree that you have. They're just going to be like, can you shoot the thing that I want? So if you want to get into commercials, start shooting commercials. If you want to start getting into movies, shoot as many like short versions of movies as humanly possible. You don't even have to make a full thing. Just make cinematic scenes. If you want to do social media, start doing social media. So that's probably like one of the thousands of things that I've learned. But I think those were, as a college student, that's where I would focus a lot of attention to.
Where do you see yourself going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Hopefully as a director and super famous and successful. No, definitely directing by that time, big movies. I think our company does a pretty good job, even though we're like small, at projecting where we're trying to head. It's like, okay, if this is where we see our company being in 10 years, what will it take? What are the hires? What are all the things that we need to get there? If we want to make movies, what is it going to take to get there? So we're kind of on track to do that stuff. As of right now, you never know. Things can hit the fan, whatever. But I think at least in 5 years, definitely directing movies, and then probably getting more in like the content sphere, because I do have a heart for social media for sure. And I think that the two can blend as well. Definitely more in the social media sphere, working with more influencers. I've worked with a lot of influencers. I love that stuff. I grew up with that stuff. I became a filmmaker too because of like Freddie W. and Julian Smith and Film Riot and stuff like that. And so I definitely have a heart for the social media sphere. So definitely those two things will probably be, and then hopefully a family or something like that, like outside of the storytelling realm. I don't know, a mansion, living in a penthouse.
$1 billion.
$1 billion sounds great. Yeah, I would definitely love to. Maybe not in 5 years, but I definitely would like to be somebody that's more in a position to invest in movies. Because my mom always taught me the thing where it's like, when you're young, it's kind of about you trying to figure out you. When you start getting older, it's about like how can you help society and work with people. And then as you get older, it's like, what are you going to leave for the world? It's like, look, I'm not going to make 1 million movies, but I know that there's a lot of younger people out there that are going to want to, and they're looking for their opportunity. So it's like, okay, how can I give back to them and invest in the youth behind me so that they can keep going and tell really good stories? So I think maybe not 5 years, but like 10 years, that's probably where I would be. Some more funding movies, hopefully. And young ideas. And I think it'd be even outside of movies. It's just like good ideas in general. I think there's so many good ideas out there that just need a chance. So hopefully that. Yeah.
No, that's great. I mean, I really like that you have the business side perspective on things too, because I think that's so important, because really businesses are run the world.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Disney's a business, Pixar's a business. It's a business. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the more you can kind of realize that and incorporate that into your perspective, like you coming through with knowing this is going to be business, you'll be better for it. Yeah.
When I started learning that, I think I was like, oh, I'm killing my dreams. I can't make the movies I want. It's like, that's not necessarily true. I think you'll just find the mix, or there's a right time, right place kind of scenario where it's like, okay, maybe that movie's not fit for right now, but it will be again. Because like media goes in waves. And so like I write a lot of like sci-fi fantasy stuff. And like right now we're like heavy in fantasy. We have Game of Thrones that just came out. You have Rings of Power that just came out. So everybody's on like a fantasy kick, and then it'll probably fade, and then we'll go into another one, and then fantasy will come back again. So it's like, okay, like learn the game of patience for sure, and be like, okay, well maybe I can't pitch the script right now, but I might be able to later, right, when there is a market for it. So and then genuinely, if you like something, there's typically a market for it. I don't know how big the market, but like there are other people. There's so many people in the world now. Like, if you like something, I guarantee you there's somebody else that also likes it. That's your market, So
tell me a little bit about working with the social media influencers.
That kind of started with like the Zach King era. So coming out of college or in college, because Zach King went to Biola. Right. So a friend of mine was like, hey, just come on this set. Like they need hands. I was like, okay. So I started working with him a lot. Through them, I met like other people. And then as we started to grow and our own social started to grow, we started getting hit up more on our DMs about like how we are doing a lot of like our VFX type stuff. We weren't getting like millions of views, but we had people like watching our stuff being like, how did you do that? We want that. And I learned a lot from like Zach King, even fun. Like I worked with him and it was funny because like how a lot of people did, but like growing up, I watched Final Cut King and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And then went and worked with him. And I was like, I learned everything from you and your tutorials. Through that, it just kind of started to open up doors. And that's kind of where I see social media being so powerful nowadays too. It's just like you can connect with anybody around the world. So as we started posting more on our personal social stuff, we just started getting like DMs and started connecting with people. And then, the more you get outside of college and you're just like meeting people and going to events and stuff like that. You kind of like meet up. And so I've been around, I haven't like worked with them, but I'm friends with some of the people over at like the Airac team. I've worked with people that have worked with like the Mr. Beast team. I've worked with a lot of bands. We worked with Lindsay Sterling a couple of weeks ago, which was really, really cool because I grew up watching her too. And I was just like, awesome. I love your stuff. It was great. Yeah, even like a lot of the old Viners and stuff like that too. I worked with like Gene Roberts a lot and the people that he was hanging out with. And so it's just kind of been like random occurrings of just like through social media, we've been able to connect. That's again, like I said, like that's why I love social media. It's just because I think there's bad things to social media, but I think the good thing is that it does connect people and it connects creatives. Like going back to your other thing too about like being a college student, I would leverage social media so much right now because you can just message anybody or comment back and forth, and if you follow each other back, that's a way to like build connections with like DPs and directors or other social media people that you want to work with. It's kind of just been like a random events and people just being like, hey, we want that, can you work with us? We're like, sure. And then we like look back and we're like, we just worked with them and they have millions of views. It's crazy.
What did you do for Lindsay Sterling?
We worked with a band called Girlfriends with Travis Mills, and they were doing a collaboration on their new album. She was a violinist, and so we did like 3 TikTok ideas and went into their studio and just helped them shoot the content for them. So it was fun. I enjoyed it, but it was cool kind of seeing like one of my like I wouldn't say like childhood heroes, but I definitely grew up watching her a lot. I'm like, this is wild. Like I'm helping her shoot her things now. Like this is crazy. So it was like, it's short and it's fun, and again, I think that's also why I like social media too, because sometimes it's short and like there's not a lot of pressure on it. And yet I get to like meet those people and connect with them and again, like hear their story and whatnot. That's kind of like why I got into this in the first place. So
it's cool that you're like, I feel like you're doing a lot of interesting, fun things and not doing the same thing all the time, which is the big thing I like about filmmaking is, it's very broad. So like every day is going to be a little different. And you get to explore different things, meet new people, see new places. I'm
definitely spread thin a lot of the time. I think I remember having meetings with my college professors being like, I'm a jack of all trades, but a master of none. They always finish the quote, right? It's like master of none, but still better, or like master of none, but still better than a master of one, something like that. But I think that is why I do like filmmaking, because it's just being creative, and film encompasses every aspect of creativity, music and marketing and storytelling and visuals and clothing and all that stuff. And it's really, really cool. Once you kind of can realize that like a lot of this, even social media and all that stuff, it's just coming down to ideas and telling short forms and whatnot. I like it all. It's not for everybody. Not like everybody loves short form and stuff like that, and that's totally okay. But to me, I've always used that as practice for my movies that I'm going to tell, because if you can tell something in a micro 15 seconds and move somebody in that 15 seconds, then okay, you're now compounding that over time. And if you break down scenes and just into just moments and conflicts between scenes, it's like, okay, if I can do that for 15 seconds, now I can do it for 30 seconds, now I can do it for a minute, and it just kind of works. And that's also why I really loved commercials, because it was especially if you could work with the right clients, it's a playground for you to test out the things that you want to use for your movies. So I'm 100% sure that if we ever made a movie, you're gonna see similarities from our commercials that we shot in the movies, because I'm just gonna test this idea out. Oh, it worked. Now it's gonna be in our movie. And then same with the social media stuff. Like that's like one thing that I would encourage people on. It's like, okay, well, while you're waiting to make maybe your features or your bigger things that you want, like don't overlook the repetition that you can get on all the short form stuff, because that's going to compound over time, versus if you're sitting around all the time and never working on anything, the person that's doing 100+ pieces of short micro content actually might be in a better position than you just sitting around not working on a bunch of micro content. So
what's your favorite part of the filmmaking process?
Ooh, all of it.
Yeah.
No, that's a lie. I mean, directing for sure is a huge one, because you're managing the team. I think I've always had a perspective of like the director is just building the playground for everybody else to like play on and whatnot. You're just setting the boundaries and then letting them kind of like create the thing. I've always loved that. And honestly, it's not necessarily like a department type thing, but I think one of my I was literally talking to my director or producer this morning about it. It's like, I love what we're doing, even business wise and the storytelling wise. My favorite thing is identifying what somebody does really, really well and elevating them in that. And so I think that's where I really love our team right now, where it's just like, okay, no idea is a bad idea. And especially at the very beginning, like pre-production phase, like kind of just letting people bring their ideas to the table and then elevating them in those ideas is probably like one of my favorite things to do. And especially when like something like really works and you find like, oh, this person would be fantastic on pitching this, and they just came up with a really good idea, and then being like, yeah, we're gonna champion that idea. I think just personally, I really like doing that. And I think I see that a lot when I'm producing and directing more, because I can kind of be more on the, like as like a coach, right? You're building the team and then letting your players be in the right place. So that, I think that's where I have a lot of heart for directing for sure. And then I love making, I don't really act, but I love being in the short sketches that we do and just being an idiot and running around and doing slapstick comedy. And I grew up doing stunts, hence our company, Action Studios. We grew up just doing fight stuff all the time. And so that aspect of like filmmaking for sure is always the most exciting on set, because you got like cars flipping, or you're going through a wall, or you're breaking glass, or I'm being hoisted 45 feet in the air. Like that's always just like fun, because those are the stories that I can come back and tell my like non-filmmaker friends, where it's like, what did you do today? It's like, I got flung in the air. Like, what did you do today? It's like, sat at my desk. I love those aspects for sure. Yeah.
That's awesome. What's some of the best advice that you've ever heard?
Probably from my mom.
Yeah.
Something. I don't know. Be humble in everything that you do. I don't know. I feel like I get new nuggets of information like all the time that I utilize throughout my day. Being humble is probably a really good, honestly, it's not a bad piece of advice. I think in this industry, people talk about how it can get really dark really fast. And I think one thing is humbling yourself, and also like backseating your pride as much as you can, as much as it's like, it's our creative ideas. It's like, you want to like champion it. It's like remembering that everybody's a person and that we're all just like in this together, and we're all want to make art together and have fun making art. And the more times I've been able to kind of like humble myself and like put down my pride on trying to champion my baby, that's kind of when the ideas flow better. And then regardless of how the project came out, I can always look back and be like, well, I was glad on how I built the relationships with the people rather than the piece. And I think that would be the piece of advice, is always remember, it's like people over the piece of art that you're making matter more. That's probably the best advice I can give in this field, where it's just like, you know, your piece is going to fade. Your art piece of art is going to fade eventually, but the relationships that you have can last like forever. So
that's good, man.
Yeah.
Brilliant. It's a solid piece of advice.
It's good. I just made it up right now. Somebody probably said that before somewhere, some book. My mom probably. I mean, how do you guys write your stuff? You got to tell me something. You got to give me one piece of it. Give me a nugget before I leave.
I feel like for me, like the characters are the most important. So anytime I'm writing something, is going to be character first.
Yeah.
And having a character that you can relate to, and having a purpose and a journey with that character. So I think even if we're talking about like, you know, short form content, there's still going to be a character. You know, it could be, you know, something super simple, a basic sort of character, but like they're still trying to do something. They have a goal and they got to do something, and either they fail or they succeed.
Yeah. And how do you think that you find those moments in your characters? Like, how do you think it's like experience based? Do you think it's just like other story? How are you intaking that to write those? Because it has to be relatable somehow, right?
Yeah.
How do you guys intake that?
I mean, I think a lot of it is based off people that we know. So, you know, I'm always like, whenever I have my friends or wherever we're talking, or stories that you hear on the news, or from other people, family members, like I feel like it can come from anywhere, and you just kind of distill it down, and you feel like, oh, that makes a good story, or like, oh, I see why that person did what they did. And then you're like, okay, now you backtrack a little bit and say, okay, how do we place that in our story so it sets this up so that the character can, you know, come to a crossroads where they make a decision, and it's like, okay, I see how the character got to where they are. And
that's great.
Kind of by looking backwards.
Yeah, it's like, don't reinvent the wheel. Like, the story's out there in the world, so it's just like be watching and listening. That's great. I'll take that.
The stories are all around you.
Yeah.
You just got to be looking for them.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
There you go. That's my piece of advice.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, Jace. I really appreciate it. And I always love talking to people and just getting perspectives, and that's what this podcast is all about. And just, you know, like you were saying before, like helping out people that are coming along behind you. I'm a really big proponent and fan of that as well. So,
awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks again.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for watching. And make sure to subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys next time.